What
What's
you
up,
need.
guys? We are back. Fitness Profit Multiplier, Anthony and Jimmy. Today, you're thinking about opening up the second facility. Your first gym is doing pretty well. Now you're like, I need to open up a second facility. That's how I'm going to do it. Today, we're going to be telling you what you need before opening up the second facility. And we kind of did a training on this before as far as picking locations go. That was a really insightful podcast if you guys didn't listen to that or watch that on YouTube, because we actually did a screen share and that was a good episode. So I would definitely head on over to our YouTube channel and watch that there. But yeah, what do you actually need nuts and bolts wise before opening up the second facility? And I would say, what milestones do you need to be at in your current facility before opening up the second facility? But yeah, so I have two facilities, and looking back, hindsight's always 2020, as the saying goes. Looking back, I was not at the milestones. I was not at all the milestones I needed to be in order to have a successful jumping off point on my second location. Granted, something went around the country and shut everything down 1 week after I signed my lease. Neither here nor there. If I could have redone it, I would have waited a little bit more to make sure I hit these certain milestones that we're going to be talking about. But Jimmy, I know you're chomping at the bit, man, to open up that second facility. But yeah, so let's talk about these milestones, man, and let's kind of talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at second facilities and we look at, some guys that we know and some guys in the industry, and just because another guy or gal that you're looking up to or follow their rhetoric has opened multiple facilities doesn't mean they were ready to, doesn't mean they're making more money than you, and doesn't mean that they're even profitable at all, right? So, and doesn't mean that their revenue is even as high as the revenue that you're generating. So you can't look at somebody and go, oh, well, they've got 3 facilities or 4 facilities or 6 facilities or whatever it may be. You don't know the ins and outs of the P&L of that business. You don't know the long-term plan. You don't know why they have the other facilities and how well each facility is doing. You have no idea if they're robbing one facility to pay for the other one, or if they're even profitable at all. So I wouldn't look at multiple facilities as, necessarily a litmus test of somebody having a better life or a better profit margin from their business, because we get into this business not only to help people, but to grow our own wealth and do it better our way, right? So having multiple facilities where you're making less than your trainers make doesn't make a lot of sense, right? You're the owner. So the first thing I want you guys to think about, if your aspirations are to open multiple facilities, you have to be, 1, ready to do it, but 2, don't look at somebody that has multiple facilities as a god in the industry, because it doesn't mean that they're making more money than you. And it doesn't mean that they're serving people better. It just means they have more overhead and they have more clients to fill into their business. Are they doing it right? Are they not? You don't know the ins and outs of that just looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, agreed 100%. I mean, I was way more profitable with one facility than I am with 2. Even though I'm making more technically, I'm not as profitable because there's obviously certain things that are needed in the second facility that you're just not going to get, and you're spreading yourself kind of thin with 2. So there's really 3 things that you need to have in place before opening up your second facility. First one, pretty obvious, is going to be your staff. You need to have a staff. So when you're going to open up the second facility, first things first is you have to protect number 1, because number 1 is going to basically be feeding the second one until the second one gets up and running. So you have to protect number 1. So how do you protect number 1? You have to make sure number 1 remains the same. If you step away from that day to day in number 1, it should still be growing, right? And maybe I should put this one as number 1. Did I say what number 1 was yet?
We just talked about having a staff. I mean, maybe
yeah. So that's not number 1, but it should be. Well, it's part of it, right? So number 1 is going to be obviously having a staff. You need a staff to fulfill on the second one, right? But you also have to make sure your staff in the first one is really top notch good, because if now If you have the second facility, you leave the first facility to go to the second facility to start running the second facility and doing everything in that one. If your staff in the first one crumbles, you lose 2 employees. Now you've got to travel between both facilities and work double. Now you got to work double. You need insurance against that happening. And the only way to do that is to have an inflated staff. So that's the first things first. You need to have excess staff members, and you have to make sure that they're all good. Because obviously in the second facility, it's going to be minimal to start, right? You know, you're going to try to open on a probably an abbreviated schedule, you know, some morning hours, some night hours, until you kind of fill the schedule up and build it up. So in the beginning, you're not going to need much staff in the second facility, but you have to make sure number one stays intact. Because like I said, if you are just barely getting by with staff in the first one, if you go and move to the second one and one of your staff from the first one leaves, you are screwed. And it's going to take your attention away from the most important thing, which is building up the second one. So you have to keep that in mind, the staff. So I don't know if you want to jump in there, Jimmy.
Yeah, and it's removing yourself, right? Like if you are still in the day-to-day and you're running a lot of sessions.
So I'm going to cut you off. Number 2 is going to be freedom of time. So freedom of time as the owner is exactly what Jimmy's going to talk about right now. So go ahead, Jimmy.
So number 2, you could have the best staff in the world and have all these staff members, but if you haven't made the shift to shifting yourself off the floor and shifting yourself out of service providing roles, administrative things, every little thing that you do for the business, if you haven't shifted yourself away from those things, then you're not to a point where it makes sense to open another facility if the first facility needs you, right? It can't need you to operate for you to open a second one. Because how are you supposed to be 2 places at once? You can't, right? So you need a solid manager in your facility that can run it and run the plays and just check in with you here and there, so that your commitment to facility 1, arguably I would say, is less than 10 hours a week, right? You know, 10 to 15 maybe, because you're going to be spending all of your time getting the second facility up and running, marketing it, pushing that out, making sure that that's running properly, and spending most of your time over there. So you got to have that freedom and take yourself off. And you could have a lot of staff, and you could have a staff that you trust, but if you're not actively taking yourself off every scheduled thing at your facility, because psychologically you think that you need to be there and you need to be, you're not ready for the second one.
Agreed 100%, man. I mean, you know, elevation of yourself and removing yourself from all those roles is key. You know, Jimmy mentioned ideally you want to be doing about 10 hours a week on that first location, preferably remotely. You know, and this is what I said before, you have to make sure that number 1 can still function without you and still produce and still, you know, and that's where, you know, number 2 and number 1 kind of go hand in hand, right? Like being out of the business day to day and having a really, really good staff in place. Like your manager in that first facility, do not, if they're a killer, do not take them out of the first facility for the second one. At least initially, do not do it, because you need them to still be producing in the first facility. Because if any production goes down on the first one, you're going to have nothing. You're going to lose members in the first facility and you're going to have to jump back in. And again, like we said, you don't want to be bouncing back and forth and giving yourself more hours and more time. You know, it's not like, okay, I have a second facility. One, they're just, people are just going to show up. It doesn't work like that. Oh, I have a second facility now, I'm going to make more money. Not true at all. You'll make less. And, you know, I would say the perks of having 2 facilities is it is cool. Like it's definitely something you say, oh, I have two facilities, you know, I have 2 gyms, you know, I'm expanding, you know, it's a good like look, but it's way harder than it is. You know, think about it, you know, and Jimmy, I could even talk to you about this. I mean, think about it. You're 100% focused when you think of progressive performance is your 1 location.
Yeah.
But when I think about AB Fitness, I think about 2 locations. So now if I want to make a change, I have to think about it in both. I have to think about the demographics in both. My attention is split. And when your attention is split, it's very hard to make decisions. It's very hard to to grow. What's that saying? I'd rather have 100% of something that's doing well than 50% of something that's doing whatever. That's the kind of the same thing when we're talking about this. Just because you have a second facility doesn't mean you're going to make more, especially if you have no idea what you're doing, which I didn't in the beginning. And now I know. Now, if I go and open up a third location, I know exactly what to do this time. But I am nowhere near ready to go and open up a third location at this point.
Right. I mean, you have to look at all the factors that allow you to have the freedom and have the ability to actually do this. And if you're not weighing all of that out together before you make this decision, and you're just making it because it looks cool or because you want to, be the big swinger and go, hey, it's something that's tied to your self-worth of opening multiple facilities. It's not the best decision for everyone, right? And you may make a lot more money sitting in the one facility. Don't open a second facility because your ego. Open it because you know what to do, you know that it's going to be healthy, you know how to do it, and you want to help more people, right?
I would argue that if you're thinking about opening up a second facility, dump more time into your first location, because you could make way more from your first location if you did the right thing. So, for example, I have a couple things that I'm going to share with you guys, and I may sound a little jaded on this, but it's not. Take it from me, it's not as easy as it sounds. So, I was having a little bit of an issue with client experience, right? So, Jimmy gave me some advice of, okay, why don't you just go in the facility and monitor what goes on? But I have 2 facilities. So if I go into the facilities and monitor what's going on, that's going to cost me at least 20 hours of just sitting there, because I have to spend ample time in both facilities to make sure that, because they're 2 different clientele also that go to the facilities. So that's one thing. 2, my ad budget. My ad budget should technically be double what it is now. So my ad budget and Jimmy's ad budget is actually pretty similar at this point now. But think about it. Jimmy is dumping almost the same ad dollars I'm dumping into one location. I'm dumping it into 2. That's a problem. You need more. 2 is not always a good thing. 2 means 2 of everything. 2 means, I ran out of toilet paper in the second facility. That's what that means. You have to make sure, like, little things like that you normally wouldn't think of when you have 1 matter so much more. We did a whole episode on, building community, building tribe. When you have 2, it's not as easy, because when you're in the first. So I gave this example to Jimmy before. I went out to visit Jimmy's gym, and his staff was all playing tricks on each other, and they had like little frogs, and they were frogging each other and throwing the frogs in places. And that's fun. Like those types of things are really fun. It's good, like team building. It's just, it's a fun, like, camaraderie at work. When you have 2 facilities, how could I foster that in both? I can't. I'm physically not in both to do that. So these are the things where it's like, having multiple is good for a certain thing if you're really trying to franchise it and sell it. But if you're trying to make as much profit as possible, I would say stay with 1. You could really make a lot more profit. Your attention is going to be singular. All the money and everything, all the attention is going to be derived on that. And you're going to be able to blow up a lot faster that way. And then maybe you could scale quicker and go 2, 3, 4 really fast that way if you're ready. So the third thing is revenue. You have to be at a certain revenue mark to open up a second location. I used to think it was $50,000 a month. I would argue that now you need to be at $1 million run rate at the facility to go to a second or a third. That's where you need to be. Because when you're at that $1 million run rate in that one facility, now you know what to do to scale it. You've proven that you can build a successful system. You have enough staff there. You're fully taken out of that. And that's when you could say, okay, I'm pretty much at that point revenue-wise. Again, because there's the other things you have to pull. You have to pull staff, making sure you have the right team, and making sure that you're free with your time and being able to delegate. But if you're there revenue-wise, but you're not there with the other 2, don't do it. So for Jimmy, if Jimmy was coming to me and say, hey, I want to open up a second location, what do I do? Okay, you better hire, you better train them really, really good, and you better make sure you're spending 0 time in the gym, like 0, completely. And then again, same thing, anything could happen. His head person could leave tomorrow. And then what? So you got to be very, very staff heavy. You have to have a heavy revenue, so you have money to bank on, and that's to do that without a headache. If you want a headache, you can do it at 40,000 and hustle and grind and break your ass and work 90 hours and do everything yourself. And basically, what you did to open up your first one, do it all again in the second one. But again, if you have not those other pieces in place, it's not going to happen as fast as you thought it was going to happen. I ranted too much, man. So you can go ahead
That's
and go
okay.
a little bit.
That's okay. You know, when we look at it, the reasons why we want people at higher revenue clips, and you could probably get away with it at 60K, right? But, and like Anthony was saying, you're going to grind your ass doing it at 40, right? A month. You could probably get away with it at 60. But the problem is unless you have an ironclad model to get that second facility up and running and you have the staff and everything, you're putting yourself in the poorhouse to actually be able to accomplish it, right? So what I mean by that is, what does your profit margin look like, right? So if you're at 60K, right, and you have 50% margins, okay, right? Let's make it happen. But you have to realize that margin is going to get eaten really quickly through the staff that you have to hire, the rent that you have to pay, and the business that you have to build and the ad spend you're going to have to put in, right? So you have to realize that just because you're making a 50% margin on a 60K a month business doesn't mean that you're going to continue to make that kind of money. You're burning at least half of it to make that second facility actually spin up, right? So half of it per month. So when we look at that, you want to be able to open a second facility and still be in a good place in your life, right? So you still want to be able to, you know, maybe you have kids and you have a mortgage and you have these things that you need to still be able to pay for, right? So why put yourself in a position where you're kind of scraping and clawing personally just to get that second facility up and running when you had a first facility that was doing decent, right? It just doesn't make sense for a lot of people. And we see too many people that are at like 20K a month in one facility and they're like, oh man, I'm making so much and my business is doing great. And then they go and open a second facility when they're making 20K a month. Like that's not the recipe for success, right? It's just not. 20K is like the bare minimum. I mean, 20K is like what you need to operate almost, you know? So, you know, you don't want to go after that ego-driven dream that may not be the reality of what you actually think that it is. And I have never opened a second facility. I just have my one facility, right? 7 figures, one facility. But, you know, we have to look at it from a perspective of, is your profit margin enough to still give your life that lifestyle that you can handle while you're going to open the next facility? And maybe some of you listening to this might say, oh, I can sacrifice as much of my lifestyle as I want because whatever, I'll just grow it and make it happen. That may work for a short time, but that may also be a recipe for you having that lifestyle forever. And that's what we want to avoid, right? We want you guys to build wealth and be profitable and have a business that's actually serving your life as opposed to a business that's draining your life. So keep all those things in mind. The second facility is not always the ticket.
Yeah. Take it from me, guys. I mean, like, I don't regret having a second location because I think I learned a lot, but I do think I regret it and I don't regret it. I regret it because I think I could have been way more profitable with one. It's a lot more fun with one. So like, again, I use the example of Jimmy with the frogs. Like that stuff is fun. You know, you're building a good team and you know, you're making, it's the hub. It's the hub. It's a lot more fun. When you have two, it's a lot. And I'm not saying like, I hate to say it, like it's a lot of work. It's work, but it's not that fun type of work. It's a lonely type of work. You know, right now Jimmy has a team. He's got like good camaraderie at work. You know, when you have two, it's like you're the only person on the ship. It's very, very lonely and it's very tough. It's very tough. And I'm not afraid of challenge or anything like that, but it's a lonely hill to climb. It's a lonely hill to climb because you're the one steering the boat. You know, if you have a partner, maybe a little different because then, you know, a partner can go to the other facility. You can kind of maintain that one. But again, these are all strategies depending on where you're at right now. So, yeah, I would say wait as long as you can because two doesn't mean it's going to be better. Make sure you're at those milestones. Make sure you're doing minimal of 10 or less hours in your facility. You know, your team is full, the gym is growing without you. You have an inflated staff. You know, a lot more people. People are asking for more hours and you don't know where to stick them. That's a good sign that you're ready for a second one. And you should be at, you know, 60 to 80K per month. And Jimmy says 60, you can get away with it. I think to sleep comfortably, you gotta be at 80 each in order to do it where you're comfortable and you're not losing. Because guys, think about it. In order to launch a second facility, you're gonna have to dump 5 to 10K in ads to get it off the ground initially, or you're gonna start with 0 people in the door. You know, so that's a whole nother thing. So yeah, that's that. Guys, we also created a Facebook group for you guys. If you click that link below, you could join the Facebook group. If you have a personal training facility right now and you're making 20K a month, you're a good member to join. So click that link below, join our free Facebook group. We're going to help you get to that next level and put that 20K in your pocket. Jimmy, anything else you want to add on this?
Not much, man. It's just a matter of you deciding why you actually want the additional facility, and that it may not result in more profit. It may not result in more money. It may not result in you actually having that big of an impact on other people. And it may result in you just dumping a bunch of money somewhere that's not going to turn into anything. It may result in great things, but we want to give you the best chances for success at that. And the best chances for success are having a high revenue, high profit business. And maybe once you get to that point, you kind of get rid of the idea of a second facility because you're making so much off your first one that you're happy. So, you know, just think about it a little more. Food for thought.
All right, guys. Anthony and Jimmy, Fitness Profit Multiplier. We are out.